Alright, so for our secondary, more general discussion kind of video for this week, we figured we wanted to focus on an individual character that honestly has not had a lot of time in the story, but definitely seems like their time is coming soon inevitably, and that would be Urouge. Being the last member of the worst generation who hasn't played any notable role, he has led us to believe that he will be reintroduced later in the story, considering every other Supernova has played a notable role or will with somebody like Blackbeard. But we wanted to kind of speculate as to what role Urouge may play, when he does appear, when he may reappear, and whether or not when he does, it'll be as friend or foe to the Straw Hats. And so, why don't we start by just giving you guys a profile of who Urouge is.
Yeah, so he's known to the world as the Mad Monk. And while we don't know exactly where he's from, he's said to come from one of the unidentified Sky Islands. A lot of people think it is very possible that this island is Burka, the same island Enel and his followers are from.
And that Mad Monk title definitely kind of is shown throughout his character, not only in his appearance, but in the way he acts. His demeanor and appearance very much indicates a very heavy religious inspiration. Obviously, being the Mad Monk himself, his subordinates will sometimes refer to him as His Holiness or Your Holiness. And whenever he has the chance, people kind of find a way to connect them back to being one of Enel's Sky Priests, like you mentioned, not only coming from a similar island, possibly, but also having such a heavy inspiration in his aesthetic and demeanor. That would very much tie the two of them together.
Yeah, and something that's definitely interesting about him is he's the only member of the worst generation who we still do not know the devil fruit power of. We don't have a name for it, we don't know exactly what he does. And I also just think it's interesting that he is much older than the rest of the members as well.
The oldest, the tallest, and you're right, the only one unknown. We do know it's like a Paramecia type just because of what we've seen in action, where he can kind of like compound pain and give it back, but that is going to lead us into the first time we saw him, as we're going to now kind of go through each of the appearances we've seen for Urouge throughout the story, just because there haven't been that many, so it's not that much to go through.
Yeah, so his first appearance, as are a lot of characters, including Bonnie, is Saga Odi, where he somewhat demonstrates that he already seems to have some form of observation hockey, and is also, at this point, the only member of the worst generation there that actually feels confident in fighting against a pacifista, and holds his own pretty well.
Yeah, in a 1v1, he gives it to the pacifista, pretty much everything it gave to him, and some people speculate this is kind of like related to a karma-like power he may have, but we're gonna have to wait and see. But yeah, he also kind of noticed Drake's attack coming, so maybe similar to the mantra we saw with Enel's Priest, and the next few times we see him isn't until Marineford, where a lot of other people are watching this battle going on, and for somebody who doesn't really break a smile that often, he definitely does seem a bit disturbed just seeing what happens with Ace and everything like that. And that actually kind of ties into his next brief appearance, where we see him post-time skip, where he is outside of Raijin Island with his crew, and this is one of the few times he does kind of drop that smile. It seems like this is really bringing back some bad memories, which again may tie him back to Enel.
Yeah, and then he disappears again for a while, and then shows up back at Wano, where he's seen on the Sky Island praying while he watches depressed Kaido getting ready to jump and commit suicide.
Yeah, and there are some other mentions of where he is throughout the story that we've gathered, especially his interactions in Big Mom's territory, where he not only defeated one of the Sweet Commanders, Snack, but they also had to send a follow-up party after him with Cracker that did end up defeating Urouge and damaging him, which is why he's bandaged when you see him on those Sky Islands.
Right, and while there is a lot of mystery behind this character, we can also draw a lot from the aspects that we do know about him that really set him up as a pretty unique part of the story.
Absolutely, and one of those that I'd already mentioned a few times is that consistent smile that never seems to leave his face, very akin to some of those members of the Will of D, like Luffy himself, who's always smiling as Joy Boy. But there's only been 2 times that we've ever seen him drop that notable smile. And one, as I mentioned before, was when he was outside of Raijin Island, which seemed like it was a very personal, disturbing, maybe just bringing up some traumatic experience for him. But the other one was when he was praying for Kaido, and that could be alluding to just how much his religion really means to him. If he is such a naturally smile through everybody person, but he takes the solemn attitude to respect that kind of moment of somebody's life, that could be a very integral part of his character.
Right. And the crew name, the Fallen Monk Pirates, could also allude to his potential connection to Enel, where he could have actually lost his home country and had to leave the Sky Islands. And this was a direct result. Well, they still look at him as a monk. He's literally been taken away and banished from his homeland.
Exactly, fallen to the blue sea below, fallen as a man in his country and everything. All of that would earn him such a title, so it's a very fitting concept. And again, he's kind of reached the point where he's just the only odd one out for the worst generation. He is the only one that hasn't met Luffy. He is the only one whose devil fruit name we don't know. And he's the only one we don't really know with a connection to any major power in the world. Most of the other first generation were tied to emperors. Obviously, Bonnie and Drake are a bit different with Sword and being tied into Kuma and Vegapunk in the world government. But Urouge just seems like he's been doing his own thing, and he hasn't really been shown to be super loyal to anybody.
Yeah, and especially with how centric to everything Bonnie has turned out to be, it really seems to kind of lean into the possibility that Urouge also could be a more plot-centric character with a lot of direct purpose to the story, and, like you were saying earlier, could have a part in helping progress the concept of Nika or other religious concepts. There's also him smiling being akin to the D-Clan members.
And so, with all that in mind, we wanted to propose 2 main ideas as to when we think it would be appropriate for Urouge to reappear in the story and be relevant. And the first of which is actually very soon, which is very likely the next arc we have up being Elbaf. And this could be approached in a few ways. Obviously, the giant warrior pirates and the giants at Elbaf have a very deep connection to the sun god. They have their own ceremony and ritual where they fast for the sun god, and now they're coming all the way to Egghead to protect their sun god. So it would make sense to have another character that's deeply religious and perhaps into the same faith be there to act as a sort of explanation or a sort of conduit to help Luffy understand the true lore or depth of what he represents.
Yeah, and if it's not going to be at Elbaf, you've got to think that it's very soon after, still within the final saga and before the final war, because with all that has been withheld from him and the little droplets we've gotten along the way, it just feels like he has to have more to the story and, you know, be a key to all of the secrets of the world.
Exactly, and I did put another note that in a certain way, if he were to kind of be that explanation for that religion or of the word of Nika, it could be in a certain way to act as a stand-in for what Kuma could have been had he not lost his humanity. And so I think that's a really interesting way to approach it, and in that regard, I want to pivot us to talk about what could be some of his potential roles in the story when he does finally appear, like we've been touching on.
Yeah, and I feel it is very likely that he will help explain some of the lore and history behind the Nika fruit, Joy Boy, and a lot of the true power that Luffy may actually have that he still might not even have gained access to yet.
And he might even deny it. He doesn't even want to be a hero, so who's to say he wants to be a god? But it is important for the audience and for probably his crew more than Luffy to know what this means to the world. But in a certain way, like we've been alluding to with a bunch of other connections and interesting aspects of Urouge, is that he has a lot of his character that is very much seemingly tied to Enel. He's bothered by Raijin Island, which could be bringing up bad memories. He very much alludes to having this similar attire to some of the Sky Priests we see, referred to as His Holiness, and obviously we know he hails from a Sky Island. If there's gonna be any chance to bring back such a notable character like Enel, it would probably be through a character like Urouge.
And both with his connection possibly to Nika, and then also just the general being a monk, and likely devout follower of religion, and Luffy's sun god abilities, it just seems very likely that he will become an ally and maybe even a part of the Grand Fleet, but almost certainly will help the Straw Hats going forward.
It would definitely be interesting to have not only now a former warlord in Jinbei, but another Worst Generation fall into that fleet, just kind of diversifying it more and more. But with all of that in mind, we wanted to kind of surmise everything into one easily digestible concept for you guys to walk away with, because we think it's important to remember that Urouge has been preserved for a long time for a reason. We are late into the story, and it doesn't feel like anything happening right now is really unimportant.
No, nothing's happening by chance at this point. It all has a very, very important part to the story, and often is something that has been right under our noses the entire time.
And so with him being the last one to have these mysteries revealed, we want to say that it's very likely Urouge ends up being a character that is pivotal to expelling some of those long-awaited answers we've had as fans of this series, either regarding the Sun God, the history of Burka, or maybe some other unknown mysteries or wonders that could come from the sky that we don't even know about.
And now that it also seems likely that Bonnie will be traveling with the crew for the foreseeable future, she might also be able to get some answers out of Urouge as well. For the depth of what Kuma was following in Nika, and maybe more answers to what actually goes into the history of Joy Boy.
Regardless, though, like we've said before, Oda is not a writer that wastes characters very often. And it would be a stretch to say that for this group of characters that has grown to be so essential for the later part of this series' story, to have one of them be completely excluded would be just illogical.
Exactly. Every other member of the Worst Generation has been a key part of at least one arc, and he's just been chilling in the background. It's, yeah, like you said, illogical that he doesn't come in, basically at the height of everything to this point, the climax of the entire One Piece saga.
And so it's very likely when Urouge does arrive, he's going to be very well connected or well informed or just impressive as a character. And when that time does come, we'll be here to unpack it with you. So make sure you guys like this video, comment down below what you think Urouge will do when he appears later in the story, and subscribe so you guys can come back for more content like this in the near future. But don't forget to be crew.